Man, good morning. Hey, we serve a God, man, we serve a God who is holy forever. He is for you. He is for you. I just want to give a shout out to anybody right now who tried for a long time to get sober, but then when they gave their life to Jesus. Any testimonies out there? But when I gave my life to Jesus, okay? I want to give a shout out to everybody who shouldn't be here today and is. Okay, I want to throw everybody who's out in West Texas working right now and tuning in to a church service. That's not what you do in West Texas. Can I get an amen from any of my oil field friends? That's not what you do, is go to church in West Texas, and you're there. And so we serve a God who is restoring, who is renewing, who is the God of second chances, eighth chances, shouldn't be chances. And we believe that God can do that for your marriage, okay? So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time with an introduction because we have a lot to go through, but I do want to encourage you. Please grab the connection card that you were given on your way in. There's a note section on there. I want you to write down a couple headings. I want you to write down a couple of passages in the Bible today. So I really encourage you to do that, but I don't want to do that alone. So right now I want to invite up a very special gift to me. The godly, wonderful love of my life, the lovely Laine Johnson.
Good morning, everybody. So this is definitely not my comfort zone, but I am excited to be here and to share what I think God has just really spoken to me for years. So I'm happy to be here, and y'all just have patience with me today, please.
Okay, just a couple things. We're not going to share with you things that make our marriage work today. We want to share with you principles out of the Bible for marriage. We think that that would be far more beneficial and really cover everyone. Also, this is advice that we're giving today within the confines of a relationship that is not abusive, a relationship that's not totally off the rails. So there are going to be some instances where substance is involved, abuse is involved, and obviously we encourage you to get counseling. No one needs to live under those conditions, and so please, if you're in any kind of relationship where you feel intimidated or threatened and you're not able to go get help, don't believe that. That's a lie. You are able to get help. Okay, so I just want to. Obviously, we're not telling someone. I think worst case scenario is that there's someone who walks out of here today in a completely abusive relationship that says, well, they told me just to forgive. No, we do not want you to remain in abuse. So the advice that we're giving is in the confines of you're not in danger when you go home today kind of marriage. Does that make sense? So please just know that in advance. Okay, well, we are going to get started because there's much to talk about. Please be writing these things down. And Laine, I'm going to let you take number one. There are 6 things. I'll have 6 headings for you to write down. Laine will do 3. I will do 3. And Laine, begin.
All right, so number 1, Jared touched on a little bit last week, but that is let marriage be a blessing. Ecclesiastes 4:9-12 says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their efforts. For if either falls, his companion can lift him up. But pity the one who falls without another to lift him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they can keep warm. But how can one person alone keep warm? And if someone overpowers one person, 2 can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. And that is when you have yourself, your spouse, and God in your marriage. So marriage can be a great benefit if you allow it to be.
Yeah.
So I have certain weaknesses, and I count on Jared to help me with those, and he has weaknesses where I can help him. But also more than that, we can accomplish so much more together. We're stronger together. We're more capable together, and he is a blessing to me, and I'm a blessing to him when we live according to God's purpose and principles in marriage. And another thing that I want to point out, not only can it be a blessing, but it can be miserable. And that is when you allow things to come in that the world says this is what your reaction should be to things. But if, for example, I see things that he's doing maybe that I think are wrong or that could be done better or whatever it may be, I'm like, let me tell you how that should be. And if I'm constantly criticizing, if I am tearing him down in everything he does, and then he doesn't have peace in this relationship. And I do things that drive him crazy. And I'm going to do things wrong, and I will make mistakes. Every one of us in here are human, and we are going to make those mistakes. But if we're constantly being told about our mistakes, and that's the culture, the climate of our relationship, we are going to be miserable. We're not going to be able to live in the blessing of our marriage. And I like to think of our relationship, some of y'all may have heard us say this before, but as a bank account. So
write this one down. This is good.
Yes, think of your relationship as a bank account. Are you making more deposits or withdrawals? So if I'm depositing and loving on him often, then when there's something worth bringing up, he's going to be listening and really caring what I have to say, and we're going to have a positive relationship. If I'm constantly making withdrawals and then don't make very many deposits, do you think our relationship's going to be very healthy? It's not. It doesn't go well when there are more withdrawals than there are deposits.
Yeah. So it can be a blessing. This is really good advice. Please let it be a blessing. At some point you were dating, you were courting, something attracted you to one another, and then all of a sudden that wasn't enough because we try so hard to fix each other that your annoyances are now stealing my happiness. Let me tell you, if happiness is the only thing you're in the marriage for, it will fail. For example, God called us to move here and start a church. That is not always happy times. That does not always put me home in the evenings with my wife. That puts her doing things, that puts her being, honestly, the breadwinner in a lot of situations because I don't take a lot of money from the church. And so none of those things are happy for her. Does that make sense? But she's in it for something else. And so when she gets to look out and see lives being changed, that brings joy to my wife. When she sees me being allowed to be used by God, let me tell you, and I'm not over-exaggerating this. If it were not for her, I could not be here. I mean that in so many senses. But if it were not for her, I could not be here. And so Laine allows that to satisfy her, even though that steals her happiness. Does that make sense? So there has to be something more important than happiness, and I think important is the word. You need to begin to, in your life, trade importance for happiness. I'm going to say this as quick as I can. Laine encouraged me to say it, even though I scratched it. If I said after church, we can go to whatever's good for you. We're going to go to the water park. We're going to go to Six Flags. We're going to go play cornhole. We're just going to cook out. Happy, happy, happy. We're going to do that after church. Or there's a child who's been abducted, and we're going to go save that child. Which would you pick? If you pick water park, waterboard yourself, okay? That's the wrong decision. We need to go save this child who's been abducted. Now, is that happy? No. You're going to see things that you wish to God never happened in all of human history. But it's important. And one day, as you watch that child being returned to their family, or as you watch this child graduate and walk across the stage, what you will receive is greater than a barbecue every day could ever give you. Does that make sense? Think about that in your marriage. You are sometimes sacrificing important for happy. So if happiness is the goal in your marriage will fail. It's unsustainable. And importance will eventually bring happiness. But happiness doesn't eventually bring importance. Does that make sense? Can you have both? I pray to God that you do. But which are you going to choose? Number 2, be understanding. Guys, I'm going to just hone in on you for a moment, okay? All eyes. 1 Peter 3:7, you don't know this is in the Bible, but you're about to. Husbands, in the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way, as with a weaker partner, showing them honor as co-heirs of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. If you are not being understanding with your wife, God is not listening to your prayers. Some of you, and I say some of you, some of us, however you want to do it, because at some point we've all been there, because my wife is physically, it doesn't mean mentally she's weaker, physically, I was given the strength to till the soil. She was given the brains to tell me how to do it. I think that's how it worked. But I have a physical advantage over my wife. And so sometimes as men, if we don't want to do it, we don't. Why? Because nobody can make us do it. And so because I don't have to, I don't live in an understanding way, right? And God says, no. And many of us guys are being punished for that sort of behavior. And we're looking up at God like, what's happening? That'd be like your son-in-law beating your daughter and coming to me and like, oh, man, well, you wouldn't help me with the rent this week. What's up with that? Duh. I don't like the way you're treating my daughter. Does that make sense? So, guys, we just have to understand that it is there. God will not put up with us being a bad husband, okay? And so we have to live in an understanding way. Let me just say this, and I know that this goes without saying, but maybe this advice will help someone's marriage and save from a disaster. Can you decide now, I don't care what's happened in the past, can you decide right now, I will at no point, guys, I'm speaking specifically to you, I will at no point lay hands on my wife in anger. For any reason, for anything. She's punching me in the nose and that hurts. It does hurt. Run. That doesn't make you a coward. Listen, not a man in this church would be like, you ran from your wife, you wuss. No, but if you touch your wife in anger, then we would think little, right? Not that there's not forgiveness for that. I'm just saying there's not necessarily like, that doesn't make you weak, guys. Self-control doesn't make you weak. Nope, I got to get out of this situation. I'm not going to do that. Especially in a young relationship. Guys, you need to have it in your mind right now, no matter what. Because let me tell you, there are guys who have, and maybe even in the court of law, hey, she hit me 375 times, and I retaliated one time. You will never forgive yourself for that one time. Okay? Put it in your head now for no reason. Guys, leave. Run.
And at the same time, that does not give women an excuse to be punching, hitting, encouraging, inciting, trying to bring out that action. There's no excuse. Just don't put hands on your spouse either. Yeah. Because I know of some stories, of women doing the same thing, and we don't want to say only men have that standard.
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, so there certainly are times that are worth speaking up and standing up for yourself.
Yes.
However, in instances where you're not being physically abused, but you feel like your spouse has been very cruel, whether it be words, they're not treating you right, they're not doing things right, I want to tell you that God calls us to do things differently than the world calls us. And God says forgive. The world says lash out, hurt them because they hurt you. And God says to forgive. And I want to tell you, just like he was saying, it takes strength. Forgiveness takes more strength than to lash out and to hurt back when you're hurt. And so I want to tell you guys, please reach deep within yourselves and try to forgive. And that does not make you a doormat. The world will tell you that makes you a doormat if they can behave badly to you and you forgive them. But God tells you that is his way, and that is showing love, and that's sharing Christ with your spouse to show forgiveness. Jesus, thank God, does not lash back out at us every time. He forgives us and offers so much grace. How many times would we just be squashed like a bug if it were an eye for an eye? But he teaches us that there is a better way, and we are to model his way in our relationship.
This is for men too. Don't get caught up in the get even game. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, number 3.
Okay, number 3 is don't give to get. Love, 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It is not boastful. It is not arrogant. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not irritable and does not keep a record of wrongs. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. This is the kind of love that we are to have, that God calls us to. And it's not a love to where we respond lovingly if we feel like the other person deserves it. It's the love that God loves us. That's the way that we're supposed to love our spouse. And I encourage you all, if you're not married yet, to pick a person that you can love in this way. Don't go into marriage with, who makes me feel the best and does the most for me, that I'm just so happy and want to spend the rest of my life with them. But please look at that person and say, am I willing to give them this agape love and show love when they don't deserve it?
Treating someone as a fixer-upper is, first of all, a bad idea. And secondly, unfair to that person, because they will constantly go, you knew what I was like when you married me, right? And well, I just thought I could fix you. Well, how hurtful is that? Right? So, man, if you are in a relationship / even engagement with a fixer-upper, set them free, because that's just rude.
Right.
Sorry.
Also remember, in your relationship, when things aren't going great, that the only person you can control is yourself. You cannot demand a certain action and they just do what you say or what you want. You can't behave in a way that that you're mean enough that they decide to comply, but you can control yourself and your own actions.
Good.
And again, you're not the doormat in this thing. You are controlling your actions in a way that can bring about a better response from your spouse. And that's not always the easy thing to do. It's so much harder to behave in a godly way and to show love when that's not what's coming your direction. But that is how God asks us to do it. And it's the only thing that you have control over, truly. So if you choose to respond in a way that honors God, not because they deserve it, but because that is your choice and what you are capable of having control over, then you can truly incite a better response from your spouse. First, they might seem confused, like this doesn't add up or doesn't make sense, but they will realize and they will come back most of the time treating you a little bit differently.
Love is patient, love is kind. We see this verse all the time. This is kind of a coffee cup verse, but there is in 1611, the King James version of the Bible was written, and it translates this differently. I actually think it may be the more accurate translation on this word, because the word for love here, there are 4 words in the Greek language for love, and one of those is really kind of specific to God. It's called agape. And so agape is a love that is translated in King James as charity. Right? So love would be like, listen, when I say I fell in love with my wife, it's like I began to date her and she began to give me good things, right? She made me feel special, so I dote on her. And then she makes me feel even more special, and so I try to make her feel more special. And so I think she's cute because she does, and you know what I'm saying? Like, it becomes very secular. It's like, I give to you because you give to me. And so because you gave to me, I give to you. And so our relationships are kind of have that secular pattern. God just says, hey, here. It's charity, right? Because if you give to charity, what do you get? Nothing in return. A tax deduction if it's enough, right? You get nothing in return. And so the way that God loves you is actually charity. Because he says, I'm going to die for you. Now, you don't have to receive it, but here it is. Take it or leave it, right? And so when it says love is patient, love is kind, we have in our mind, if you're worth it, I'll be patient. If you give back enough patience. If you're kind enough back to me, I'll be kind to you. And that is not what God is asking us to do. Men, specifically in Colossians chapter 3:18, he says, husbands, agape your wife. Love your wife charitably. even if she doesn't deserve it right now. Even if she doesn't deserve it right now, you give love expecting nothing in return. Does that make sense? All right, number 4. Have a high view of marriage. Set marriage on a pedestal. Okay? Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4. Marriage is to be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept undefiled, because God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterers. Okay? Obviously, this applies to more than just a bed. Because, you know, people use this verse and it says, keep the marriage bed undefiled. Well, if you're fooling around with somebody that's not your spouse and it's not on a bed, it's still wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, the bed is sort of proverbial here. Okay? This is just symbolic of something else. Okay? So don't let your mind entertain anyone else, because that marriage bed can be right here. You know what I'm saying? So let me read it. Marriage is to be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept undefiled. Keep that bed undefiled. Men, we've got to have self-control. You've got to look away. You cannot let the marriage bed be defiled, even if it's just in between your ears. We always say, well, that's not hurting anyone. Yes, it is. It's hurting you, okay? It's hurting you. We have to remain faithful. Also, I would say this. By keeping that marriage bed undefiled, that requires us to commit to one another. Does that make sense? So we see that, and again, the world can be however they want. We can't legislate Christian values on people in this way, right? This has to be from our heart. But for me not to defile the marriage bed means that I can't let anyone into my bed, even if it's just on my phone. Does that make sense? Even if it's just on the screen. And God is giving you this not as a, hey, you got to do these rules, you got to do these rules. He is freeing you from addiction if you will follow this. Go ahead.
Right. And also remember to resist the temptation to get even. If you find out that your spouse has not obeyed these commandments and you choose to stay with that spouse when there even are biblical grounds for divorce, or if there aren't, whatever it may be that you find out about, the urge, I think, with human nature is to go get even. And I encourage you to please resist that. That will only, disobeying God will only hurt you more. So please remember that. Colossians 3:23-25, whatever you do it from the heart as something done for the Lord and not for people.
Yes.
Knowing that you will receive the reward of an inheritance from the Lord. You serve the Lord Christ, for the wrongdoer will be paid back for whatever wrong he has done, and there is no favoritism. So I just want to encourage you, let God take care of the vengeance on this for you, but you behave in a way that honors him. Otherwise, you're really just tearing your relationship and tearing it up further.
Yeah. I want you to go to number 5, but this is what we're saying. There are some days that my wife pours respect onto me, and I don't deserve it. And do you know what that makes her? That makes her like Jesus. Because when he died for me, I didn't deserve it. Does that make sense? I would love to say there are some days that I love my wife when she doesn't deserve it. That day is yet to come. But there are some annoyances from time to time. And in my immaturity, even in those moments, it's hard to give love when I feel like it's not deserved. But guess who I get to be like? Jesus, because I did not deserve what he did for me. And he gave it to me charitably anyways. Sorry to interrupt you. Number 5.
Yes. Number 5, meet each other's needs. 1 Corinthians 7:5. Do not deprive one another, except when you agree for a time to devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again. Otherwise, Satan may tempt you because of your lack of self-control. And this is scripture, 1 Corinthians 7:5. And I'll keep it PG, but this context is physical. I want to encourage you guys to not plan your husband out of your day. if that makes sense. So don't make yourself too busy or plan everything in that you have no time for your spouse. And I think that we're all guilty of, just being exhausted because of lacking to plan. So the opposite of that, but schedule for opportunities. Schedule to have time for your spouse.
That is a clever way of saying schedule for opportunities.
He gave me this bullet point, guys. But honestly, I think that we have often no intentionality and just let everything else come before, but prioritize your relationship, prioritize your spouse. Let them know and see that you have made an effort to have that time for them.
No, I want you to keep talking. I'm kidding. She was like, really, you're giving me 1 Corinthians 7? Yeah. The principle can be extended to other things as well, okay? Because the context of this passage is physical, but I think that we can extrapolate this principle into other things. In the same way, fellas, maybe your wife is like, oh, not tonight, I'm not in the mood. And you're like, well, duh, you're not in the mood. You were doing this until 11 o'clock, and you're tired. Am I not worth stopping a little earlier? Am I not worth that? And so, we kind of get our feelings hurt about that. But how many things could be applied to us in the same realm? Like, you don't talk to me anymore. You never touch me unless you want something. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are all of these things that we do where we are also neglecting not wants but needs. And it's because, well, I didn't calendar you. And why did I not calendar it? Because it wasn't important enough to me. Well, I think the guy that said happy wife, happy life, I think this is what he was talking about. You know what I'm saying? Back to the bank account, like, hey, you didn't make enough deposits for withdrawal like that. So I think this goes both ways. Number 6, and this is where we need to spend the lion's share of our time. Love and respect. I want you to write that down. Love and respect. I actually bought more books this week called Love and Respect. They're on our bookshelf. There are many good marriage studies out there. This one is my personal favorite. So we have those on the bookshelf if you want to dive deeper into this. There's a price above that, and the price is just what we paid for them. We don't sell anything for a profit. So you just get as close to that as you can. Stick money in the envelope or PayPal us or whatever. That's just on the honor system. That's on you if you want to dive deeper into this. But Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5 starts off with kind of a Christian living section, and then we get into a marriage section. And this is the wives obey your husband, husband love your wife. And I'm going to skip down to the bottom of that section just for time's sake. I want you to read it. You owe it to yourself. If you're married in a relationship, if you're thinking about it, if you have friends that are married, you owe it to yourself to read this. Also, if you are a Christian, you owe it to yourself to read it, because marriage is more than just about you. My relationship with my wife is representative of Christ and the church. And so ultimately, men, what did Christ do for the church? He gave everything. What did the Christ do? What did the church do for Christ? They love that he gave everything. And so they treat with honor and respect because he gave everything. And so this is what makes it really difficult, right? Because, I think men are like, well, it's hard to give everything for somebody who doesn't even like me. Or women could say, it's hard to honor someone. It's hard to give any sort of obedience to someone who didn't do anything like Jesus did, right? And so this is where it breaks down. We'll get to that in just a moment. But in summary, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33, it says, to sum up, each of you is to love his wife as himself, and the wife is to respect her husband. Why didn't it just say, husbands, love your wife, wife, love your husband? Why didn't you just say that? Or respect is fine too, because women want respect too, right? So why didn't it just say, husband, respect your wife, and wife, respect your husband? Why change the language in there? And there's been a lot of research done on this, but guys, ladies, we work on a little bit of a different currency. Now, again, like I said last week, there are some of you who are like, hey, this doesn't really, I'm actually more, I would rather have the respect. So we're going to call this a bell curve. We're going to call this the 80-20 principle, okay? So when I say, hey, this is a masculine thing, this is going to be like 80% of men. When I say this is a feminine, that's going to be like 80% of women. Not all. And I gave you this example. Between the two of us, I'm the nag. If I just said nag in our culture, most of you would say, well, the woman's the nag in the culture because that's what we've seen on TV, that's what we've seen in the culture. No, that's me. That doesn't make me feminine. Okay? That just makes me like what is stereotypically supposed to be the woman's role. So we're breaking stereotypes, okay? I'm saying that as a preface here. But why doesn't it just say love and love or respect and respect? Because guys deal on a respect currency. For example, here's a conversation that you've either had or overheard. Honey, you were too hard on the kids. I don't care. Well, they're not going to love you if you treat them that way. I don't care if they love me as long as they respect me. Okay? Men will make statements like that because this is the currency that we work on. We work on respect. In fact, most male-dominant workplaces, again, this is not every time, are fairly peaceful places to work because men work on a respect currency. I don't mouth Dusty every morning because Dusty will pop me in the nose. If you disrespect me, we're going to duke it out. And then after Dusty pops me in the nose, I'm like, man, I didn't see that coming. Good shot. Now we're friends again. And women are always just like, gosh, that is so crazy. You guys just fought. And it's because he earned my respect, right? He stood up for himself as a man. He earned my respect. Women work on love. To love like women love is a superpower. On the other side of this wall, there's a lot of children. There's not a lot of men, and they're working with them. So we don't have, and now I love kids, but by golly, if your kid stays with me, I either have the authority to whip them or they don't stay with me, okay? Because there will be respect in my house, you know? They go home and they're like, well, Miss Laine loves me, you know, and that kid might have been a complete hoodlum, but there's love. Does that make sense? So we sort of work on a little bit of a different currency, but Jesus was so good at this. Remember, God is not a man. Love is part of God. Respect is part of God. One is not better than the other, okay? But as I try to find a way to show love to someone who's not respecting me. Guys, is this not the hardest thing? As I try to show love to someone who's not respecting me, I have to dig into my faith and go, what did Jesus do for me when I did not respect him? Because let's go down your timeline a little bit. Has there been any moments where you didn't respect him? Where you cheated on God like we talked about last week? And still, he loves you? That's the standard.
And at the same time, how do you show respect to a man who's not showing love? And that's a question that I've been asked is how can I show respect when I don't feel loved? And it's the same thing. Jesus, you know, he calls us to behave in that way, and he responds to us differently than how we should feel. I tell kids when they're little, I start teaching these kids, don't act. You don't always have to act the way you feel.
Yes.
I think when we're little, we're born wanting to act the way we feel, right? And so we learn that when we're young and these principles, but don't always learn that in our marriage, that you don't have to act the way you feel. So if you're not feeling loved, you can still behave respectfully toward your spouse. And that's hard. That's a harder thing to do. It takes more strength to do, but that's what God calls us. That's his way versus the world's way.
Yeah. If God only acted out of reaction to you, like we do to one another, he'd have zap-fried me like a microwave Pop-Tart years ago. Right? But he doesn't, God is not reactionary to us. He stays in his nature. Now, will he discipline? Yes. But he doesn't act out of reactionary emotional responses. Okay? Now, I have this for you because this sort of represents my wife and this represents me. Okay? Because I, signified by blue, I deal on a respect currency. Okay? And so I hear respect. It's what I'm listening for. And I speak respect. That's what I'm shooting for. Similarly, I speak respect, but she hears something different because she has proverbial pink hearing aids and I have a blue megaphone. Also, when she speaks femininity, when she speaks love, I'm listening for respect. Does this make sense? And so, remember, guys, we have to live in an understanding way with our wives. Okay? And so what happens is, all right, go ahead and grab both of those. You don't need your mic for just a second. What happens is, I speak something that is short, concise, to the point. Apparently, that makes us bad communicators. If I said it, this is another stereotype. If I said, well, one sex is just bad at communicating, who do you all think I'm talking about? Men, because that's what we hear in our culture over and over and over. However, we go to work and do just fine. We got along just fine without you. I communicate everything to everybody I know just fine. And I do it in a third or less of the words that some other people would use. My phone conversations are short because I respect your time, not because I don't like being on the phone with you. Okay? And so I speak like that out of respect. But what does she hear? Well, you weren't on the phone long. I guess you didn't want to talk to me. Oh, you look good in that. Well, you didn't really go on about it. Right? This was that dinner good? I ate 3 plates. You never said it. No, but I belched like a cow, man. I unbuttoned my pants. Like, those are all the signs of respect. But she doesn't hear that because she's not a man. That's my favorite part about my wife. But sometimes it's the most annoying part. Does that make sense? Similarly, when she speaks too many words, I'm like, my gosh, you hate everything about me. The fact that we're still having this conversation just means that we can't get along. She's like, I thought we were having a great time. Right? And so as she speaks love, I'm listening for respect, but I don't get it. Or I don't perceive it. Because, and this is what I'm going to steal something from my wife here. Because you don't, at least anymore, you don't assume goodwill. And I don't assume goodwill, and so I listen with a tainted view, and sure enough, I hear what I planned to hear. Does that make sense? And so because I heard what I planned to hear, now I begin to grow anger and bitterness. And because I don't hear love, or because I don't hear respect, I speak in a way that is not loving. And so when she hears something, go ahead, we got to go full blown. When she hears something that is not loving, she replies with something that doesn't sound respectful. And so it's like a big poker game. It's like, oh, I see your disrespect, and I'll raise you complete butthole. Right? And so she hears complete butthole, and so she raises me Wicked Witch of the West, right? Oh, yeah, well, I hear that, and now I bring your mother into it. You know what I'm saying? And she hears that, and before you know it, we're on 23andMe looking at anything that we can scrape up on the other to get at, because I failed to assume goodwill from the person that I chose to spend the rest of my life with. I don't see a lot of arranged marriages out there. At some point you chose, and I don't assume goodwill. And some of you are like, hey, that's where we are. I definitely don't assume goodwill. Talk to my husband. He will tell you there's no goodwill. Okay. We call this the crazy cycle because I receive, and so I one-up you, and you one-up me, and so this becomes a spiral, and we spiral down, 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 down. How do you stop it? I have to hear, you're not speaking, I have to hear with, if you mix pink and blue together, what do you get? I have to hear assuming goodwill in an understanding way of my wife. And whatever she gives me, even if it's still this, even if I'm the only one on the purple train, I have to hear it in a godly fashion, assuming goodwill from my spouse, and I have to respond how? The way I respond? No. I have to respond understanding my spouse, right? And so I begin to hear and speak in purple. I'm still a man. I still got the blue. She doesn't want me to be a woman. Amen. Okay. It's like I actually didn't check that with her. She doesn't want me to be feminine. She just wants me to not be a jerk. She doesn't want me to start working on a love currency. She just wants me to understand the love currency. I don't want her to be a man. I don't want her to work on the respect currency. Forgive the tacky comment, but I don't want to be in a peeing contest with my wife every day. Does that make sense? I love her femininity. I've had to begin to enjoy things that apparently I'm just never going to change. Might as well enjoy it. We'll be married 19 years next month. This woman will not go to bed. She won't go to bed, and it's just like, go to bed. This is the busiest person I've ever met in my life. And it's just like, I just have to laugh about it now. She's just not going to do it. And if I spend the next 19 years trying to change her, all I've done is make it miserable, because that's one thing out of 10,000 that annoys me about my wife. And so I live in the 1% instead of loving the 99%. Does that make sense? Now, does that give her excuse not to change? Till the day I die, I'll be like, please just go to bed. You're keeping me up and I'm tired. But I say it like this now. Does that make sense? In an understanding way of my partner. Laine, go ahead.
I encourage you to remember that just because we speak and hear things differently, that doesn't mean that one way is better than the other.
Yes.
Different does not equal better. And so the goal is to hear and speak and communicate in a way that you understand your spouse, that you're understanding what they're saying, not assuming ill intent, not trying to read too far into it, but really understand their heart when they're speaking, or maybe something simple and just not choose to take offense. Like he said, live in the 99% and not the 1%. You know, encourage one another, build each other up, try to be that blessing in the relationship, and don't always act the way you feel. But in all these things, don't assume that you're better just because you see and hear and say things differently.
Let me give you one thing to work on. Obviously, we've got to be looking at Christ in the church, because we need to mimic Christ. That's the goal in a Christian marriage. This looks like Jesus in the church. Just for life support marriages right now. Let me give you one thing to do for a week and see if this helps you. If there's something that annoys you about your spouse and you say this needs to be addressed, here's how I want you to address it for the next week. Let me know how it goes. I want you to address it tomorrow. Whenever you say, this has got to be addressed. Okay, well, you're emotional right now. I want you to address it tomorrow, and I want you to address it in one sentence. If you can't put what's bothering you into one sentence, then you don't truly understand it. Okay? I want you to address it tomorrow in one sentence. Otherwise, we're going to go straight back into the crazy cycle, digging up every bad thing you've ever done. Okay? You can use this in a lot of your relationships. It doesn't just have to be marriage. Maybe there's the Holy Spirit, but I just felt like I needed to say that. But I want to pray for you real quick. And then baskets are going to come up. Part of the way we worship is with tithe and offering. And so feel free to put that in there. But also, fill out that connection card. Place it in that basket. Let us know if we can pray for you. Let us know if we can go through something with you. But also, there's a prayer team that's going to come up. They'll be here, so they would love to pray with you during worship or when that is over. But for right now, please stand and worship with us.